Hey, folks. Obviously, this is a rough day, a rough weekend. There's all out war going on between Israel and Palestine, being the bigger entity. This is footage of the hold on one second here. This is footage of Israeli jets leveling the Palestine Tower, one of the largest buildings in Gaza. The tower had more than 100 apartments, plus offices of media outlets. A clear war crime, says journalist Alan McLeod with Mint Press. And that's just one of many. I thought I'd just bring you one to begin with. But I have tons of information. Most of it, a lot of it, not the stuff you're getting from your mainstream media. And I'm going to be going through all of that as this hour proceeds. I'm going to do my best to pull it all in and show it all to you. But this is, I have about 48 tabs open right now on my computer, and I'm going to do my best to bring it all to you right now. Everything I have been able to cobble together. I thought please take a second, obviously, to click subscribe and the bell icon and all that stuff. But I thought I'd begin with this is comment. This is the response from Jewish Voice for Peace, a pretty large group that has done great work on the topic of Palestine. And I thought they also give a lot of the background of the story. And so I just thought I'd go through their response because it really does capture a lot of what's going on here. They say right now, Palestinians, Israelis, and all of us with family on the ground are terrified for loved ones. We grieve for the lives of those already lost and remain committed to a future where every life is precious and all people live in freedom and safety. Following 16 years of Israeli military blockade, Palestinian fighters from Gaza launched an unprecedented assault in which hundreds of Israelis were killed and wounded and civilians kidnapped. The Israeli government declared war, launching airstrikes, killing hundreds of Palestinians and wounding thousands, bombing residential buildings, and threatening to commit war crimes against besieged Palestinians in Gaza. And just to pause for 1 second, there is a big difference between leveling buildings and killing hundreds of innocent people and the assault by Palestinians, simply because of the capabilities of these two sides. Israel is one of the most powerful militaries in the world. And even ignoring the fact that Palestine and Gaza have been under siege for decades, it's just Palestinians don't have the ability to just level whole apartment buildings, killing hundreds of civilians at a time. It's just a completely different thing. It is David and Goliath in many ways, but I'll be getting into all that more in a moment. The Israeli government declared war. Said that, bombing residential buildings. The Israeli government may have just declared war, but its war on Palestinians started over 75 years ago. Israeli apartheid and occupation and United States complicity in that oppression are the source of all this violence. Reality is shaped by when you start the clock. For the past year, the most racist, fundamentalist, far-right government in Israeli history has ruthlessly escalated its military occupation over Palestinians in the name of Jewish supremacy, with violent expulsions and home demolitions, mass killings, military raids on refugee camps, unrelenting siege, and daily humiliation. In recent weeks, Israeli forces repeatedly stormed the holiest Muslim sites in Jerusalem. For 16 years, the Israeli government has suffocated Palestinians in Gaza under a draconian air, sea, and land military blockade, imprisoning and starving 2 million people and denying them medical aid. The Israeli government routinely massacres Palestinians in Gaza. 10-year-olds who live in Gaza have already been traumatized by 7 major bombing campaigns in their short lives. For 75 years, the Israeli government has maintained a military occupation over Palestinians operating an apartheid regime. Palestinian children are dragged from their beds in pre-dawn raids by Israeli soldiers and held without charge in prisons. Palestinians' homes are torched by mobs of Israeli settlers and destroyed by the Israeli army. Entire Palestinian villages are forced to flee, abandoning the homes and orchards and land where their family has been for generations. The bloodshed of today and the past 75 years traces back directly to the U.S. complicity in the oppression and horror caused by Israelis' military occupation. The U.S. government consistently enables Israeli violence and bears blame for this moment. The unchecked military funding, diplomatic cover, and billions of dollars of private money flowing from the U.S. enables and empowers Israel's apartheid regime. Those who continue calling for ironclad, quote unquote, U.S. support for the Israeli military are only paving the way to more violence. From the U.S., there are no sidelines. We will uproot complicity where we are. We demand that the U.S. government immediately take steps to withdraw military funding to Israel and to hold the Israeli government accountable for its gross violations of human rights and war crimes against Palestinians. We commit to escalating our campaigns for boycott, divest, and sanctions to end the billions pouring into the Israeli war crimes from corporations and private foundations. Sorry to read that whole comment, but I thought it was a good way of setting the kind of basis of what we're talking about here. And again, that was Jewish Voice for Peace. If it matters to anybody, and I know people love to say, "Oh, how dare you speak to anything unless you are the direct connection or whatever." If it matters to anyone, yes, I'm Jewish. Yes, I grew up Jewish. Yes, I even went to Israel when I was a teenager for a few days. And all of that said, it doesn't mean that you can't be Jewish and understand the reality of this situation, which is an absolute apartheid state, an absolute oppressed people. It doesn't mean I'm celebrating, nor should anyone, the death or attacks or violence against anyone. I don't celebrate Palestinian-caused deaths, and I don't celebrate Israeli-caused deaths. It's all disgusting. It's all repulsive. But I will say, no one should be surprised when you oppress and humiliate and murder a people for generations, for decades, when there's responses of all sorts. No one should be surprised. It's kind of like saying, if I see someone storing newspapers next to gasoline, next to faulty wiring, and a fire catches and burns down their house, I can say, I saw that coming, and that's exactly what I thought was going to happen. You can say that without meaning you're cheering on the fire. You see the difference? So, no, I don't think anyone should be cheering for anyone's death, which is what, unfortunately, some people are doing. But you obviously have, so many in the U.S. government right now endorsing essentially a genocide. Many in the Israeli government have also come forward and said that the entire, everybody in Gaza should be wiped out, etc. We should just bomb the entire place and turn it into a crater, an impact crater. That's genocide. That's plain and simple. And but I'm also going to get into some of the more recent causes of this in the next hour. I'm going to get into why some people are saying that Israel knew this was about to happen and allowed it to happen. All of that is coming up here in a moment. I'm not going to just bring you what the mainstream media is telling you. And of course, they've got their propagandistic view of it. This is from Al Jazeera. The death toll has already soared to 1,300. Which includes deaths on both sides. Now, normally, as in the Great March of Return several years ago, the deaths were incredibly one-sided. We're talking hundreds murdered by Palestinian forces, by the IDF, whereas literally no one killed by Palestinians. So far, in the first couple of days, yeah, there were hundreds of deaths by both, perpetrated by both sides. However, as this goes on, you're going to see that ratio become far different as Israel just obliterates whole apartment buildings. But all right, so this is Al Jazeera saying the death toll soars to 1,300 as fighting between Hamas and Israel rages. More than 1,300 people have been killed. They're saying 800 Israelis and 500 Palestinians have been killed amid heavy fighting. And I think that number of 500 Palestinians is already way dated because, whole apartment buildings are being blown up as we speak. So I don't think 500 could possibly be accurate, but bombardment following the largest attack by the Palestinian armed group Hamas against Israel in decades. So that is from Al Jazeera. Let's see. What's next? I'm trying to again, with so many tabs open, I'm trying to bring you all this information as quickly and clearly as I can. This is more footage of God damn it, of the aftermath of Israeli bombing. And a second here, I'm going to bring you. I mean, it really is just complete destruction, utter. Utter destruction of whole areas. Now, I know that some are saying, and I think time will tell. Some are saying that Hamas very clearly was going after military targets. Even Al Jazeera is reporting though that they did take civilians hostage. I don't know. I think, they often say the first victim of war is the truth. So you're going to hear both sides saying different things. But it does seem that, and it would make sense, that Hamas was largely going after military targets and yes, killing the soldiers they came across. But this type of thing where it's just blowing up whole areas of Gaza, which is an open air prison. I'm going to get into some of those details as well in a moment. But it's just so horrific to see this. I want to show you, though, over the years. Let's see here. Well, I'll come to that in a second. But the Pentagon has announced, thank goodness, that the U.S. is going to get more heavily involved, because that's what we need right now. Is we need the Pentagon more. We need the U.S. war machine that has killed so many over the years. Here it is. This is from Politico, which is a neoliberal propaganda outlet, but they are telling the truth. Pentagon to send ships aircraft closer to Israel in show of force. The Pentagon is sending ships and aircraft to Israel. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who used to be on the board of Raytheon, announced Sunday in a major show of force a day after Hamas militants launched attacks against across southern Israel. Now, of course, it's insane for the U.S. to send military troops over there. For one thing, we're not at war, supposedly, but of course, we are. Israel is a vassal state to the United States. We send them billions of dollars of aid. We send them weaponry. Many of the bombs and missiles, etc., that are dropped on the Palestinian people are made by U.S. companies and then either sold or given to Israel. So this is also a big boon for the defense industry, which is a euphemism. The fucking murder industry is what it is. It's a mass machine of organized human murder. That's what our Pentagon is. That's the fucking definition of it. And they make crazy money every time something like this happens. So this is a very exciting time for so many of these war profiteers that enrich themselves and enrich their friends and get rich as fuck every time people are murdered, children are blown up. They are celebrating, they are high-fiving. That's the type of thing that goes on right now, while they all post Israeli flags and say, we stand with Israel on their pages and say, we're just all grieving for Israel. Behind the scenes, they're all high-fiving that they get to make so much money. And it's not just Israel, obviously, that would want more weaponry having this go on, but many Arab states that also buy arms from U.S. company. Many states around the world buy arms from U.S. companies. So they just, anytime there's a large scale war like this, they get very excited and they make a shit ton of money. And the U.S. is now sending, the Pentagon has announced that we're getting involved, because you know what always happens when the U.S. gets involved is everything just goes really smoothly, and then there's soon thereafter there's peace. Have you noticed that? Like the U.S. jumps in, and just like within like I'd say a day or two, there's always peace and love and no more killing. Every time the U.S. military gets involved, that's always how it works. It's amazing how their resume is just like boom, peace, 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 peace. Fucking nail it out the park every time. So since the Pentagon is sending these ships, etc., over to Israel, Palestine, we should see peace, I'd say, in a day or two. Also, Jared Kushner, his Israel Palestine peace plan is coming through any day now. He said he's just on the. Do you remember that Trump put Kushner in charge of peace in Israel and Palestine, and we're all like, oh yeah, that'll do it. That should fix it. No problem there. So yes, U.S. sending our war planes and our fucking destructive forces over there, says the Pentagon. Let's see. What do I want to bring you next about this catastrophe? So this was actually shared, although it's been going around from a lot of people, but this is shared by Nick at Revolutionary Blackout Network. This is the number of deaths that we have seen over the years, rather than just in the last few hours. This is human cost of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is even that is a euphemism. It's not an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's an apartheid, oppressive, just destruction of an entire people. And that's what it should be called. So calling it a conflict sounds like, oh, both sides, you're just really fighting over there. But it's years of just destruction of a people. These are the numbers, and I'll read them out loud for those of you listening to the podcast. For those who prefer podcasts, this is called the Leecamp Show on Spotify. It's also called Moment of Clarity on other platforms. Don't ask why. It has to do with censorship. But so here are the numbers going up to 2020, starting in 2008. The number of Palestinian dead in 2008 was over 3,000. The number of Israeli dead was 850, which is actually a lot. That's one of the higher years. The number of Palestinian dead in 2009, 7,460. Number of Israelis dead, 120. Number in 2010, 1,600 Palestinians dead, 185 Israeli. Let's skip down to 2012, just because I don't want to read them all, but they're all pretty similar ratio, where you have thousands upon thousands of Palestinians being murdered. And of course, just to be clear, this does not count all the Palestinians that die from the fact that they can't get medicine, or they can't get clean food, they can't get clean water, all of that stuff. This is just straight up murders. This is straight up murder numbers. The number that were killed in, man, I've opened too many tabs and now I can't find anything. All right. 2012, almost 5,000 Palestinians killed, 570 Israeli, 4,000 killed in 2013, 157 Israelis. And then in 2014, almost 20,000 Palestinians murdered compared to 2,800 Israelis. Almost 15,000 murdered in 2015 compared to 340 Israelis. I'll skip down to 2018, almost 31,560 Palestinians killed, murdered by Israelis, 130 Israelis. So you can see these numbers of Palestinians killed are actually getting higher and higher and higher, while the number of Israelis are going down, murdered, are dwindling to almost nothing. And it just goes to show that this is not like a war. It's not like a fair war. It's not like two sides they just keep fighting and one day one of them's going to win. No, it's a massacre. It's damn near a genocide. It's just in 2019, it was 15,600 Palestinians killed, 133 Israelis. And in 2020, the last day they have, this is from the United Nations, by the way. This is not some crazy source. 2020, 2,780 Palestinians killed, 600 Israelis. And again, this does not include all the Palestinians, which is a lot, who die from the fact that Israel has laid siege to the entire area, meaning they won't allow people in very easily. You're very lucky if you get out to go see family or to go get a medical procedure. It's very rare. They have cut off water. Many people are sharing the article saying that years ago, they're saying several years ago, that Israel was saying they were going to put Palestinians on a quote unquote diet where they decrease the amount of calories to a tiny amount. So really it was starvation level of food getting in. So this is not counting all the people that die because of those reasons, which is a lot. Unclean water is the number one killer of humans on this planet. So when you are limiting the amount of water and the type of water that can get in, and it's mainly unclean water, it kills thousands. And I've got some more facts about Palestine coming up, but some other things that people don't know about Palestine is about Gaza is they have essentially 4 hours of they often have 4 hours of electricity a day. They often don't have gasoline. They can't get medical procedures. They can't get medicine. They can't get the most types of food. Something I found very fascinating in Abby Martin's documentary is the percentage of Palestinians that die from breast cancer, which is now largely treatable. Most people who get breast cancer, including my mother, survive. And many of them, luckily, they can often get through it in just a few months. With surgery, etc. But in Palestine, breast cancer is it kills something like 80% or some crazy percentage because they can't actually get out to the effective hospitals and things like that. They're not allowed to leave. Somebody says I'm reading the chart wrong. How am I reading it wrong? This is the number of Palestinians killed by Israel. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, you are correct. I was reading it wrong. I was conflating. I didn't notice that there were different colors there because, again, it's also small. So sorry. That was. Find the fucking chart. Don't worry, there aren't that many charts, so it's not all going to be this rocky for this hour. You are correct. Red is injuries and blue is deaths, murders. So the numbers I was giving was both injuries and deaths combined. And so those numbers I just gave you of those thousands was injuries and deaths combined. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm sorry I got it wrong. But I will say this, in one way that sounds better because you're like, oh, well, it was, for example, 2018 was 31,000 injuries and deaths. But the reason that's almost worse is because for the number of Israelis, I mean worse in terms of ratio, not worse in terms of, oh, we didn't kill many Israelis or people didn't kill many Israelis. But in terms of ratio, there's essentially 0 Israelis murdered on this chart. So in terms of ratio, that is actually even more ugly. But I don't want to see any Israelis killed. I don't want to see any Palestinians killed. But anyway, the chart still shows how lopsided this is. And I'm sorry that I misread the coloring of the chart. Let's see. Okay, here's a better chart that actually shows some similar stuff. And I think it might almost be impossible for me to get this one wrong. Let's see if I can manage to get this one right. I think it might be almost impossible. All right, this one is this. So this is also from the UN. This is 2008 to 2023, all added together. Now, the blue chart. Let me take my time and get this right. The blue pie graph is showing fatalities. fatalities. Okay. And the entire number of Israeli plus Palestinian fatalities is 6,718, according to UN Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. That's murders. Now, of those, 4.6% are Israeli deaths. So a tiny little sliver, for those of you listening to the podcast, a tiny little sliver of the fatalities is Israelis. Injuries, 158,867 injuries, and an even smaller sliver is Israeli, 4%. Okay. Don't think I got that chart wrong. That chart is correct. But you guys can tell me I got it wrong, and then I'll figure it out again. Yes, people are excited for pie charts. But guess what? There's a solution to all of this. It is for Israel to no longer be an apartheid state. That's the solution. And there will not be an end to violence and killing and death and destruction until either Israel is no longer an apartheid state or Israel commits a full-on genocide of all the Palestinian people and kills millions of people. So which one of those are we siding on? Which one of those do we want to see? Would we rather Israel no longer be an apartheid state, which actually threatens their own security? It creates anti-Semitism. It causes misery and destruction for so many people. And there are many Israelis that are against the apartheid state of Israel, meaning they would like to have separate states where people could come and go as they please and are not in an open air prison. And Israel as an apartheid state does not work. And you know, I know I've said it's disgusting like 300 times, so I don't know how many times I can say it. It's just all repulsive to see this much killing and destruction, and then to see the propaganda coming from our mainstream media and the lies they tell. There actually is one, I'm not going to play it because it's too long, but there actually is one good interview, well done interview on CNN by Fareed Zakaria, because they sandwiched in the middle of just straight up Israeli propaganda. And then they had one 9 or 10 minute interview. It's on my Twitter at leecamp if you want to watch the full thing, where the representative for the Palestinian people is giving all the actual facts of what's going on. And Fareed Zakaria tries to hit him with the propaganda, but he does a great job of responding. Okay, now let's move on to the evidence. And there is a fair amount of evidence that Israel very well might have known this was going to happen and allowed it. And I know the kind of instant reaction to that is, why the hell would they do that? Well, having an assault on your people allows for all kinds of tactics to be used, such as bombing the shit out of Palestine, such as bombing the shit out of Gaza. They have the weaponry to destroy all of Gaza, and they're doing a lot of it now. And it also allows even increased surveillance. I know Israel is one of the most surveilled countries in the world, but they can even continue to up an assault on people's rights in Israel. And so here is this is a WikiLeaks cable that WikiLeaks tweeted out that was printed a long time ago, many years ago, but there's so many thousands of cables from WikiLeaks, people miss a lot of them. This is the Israeli Defense Intelligence Chief Amos Yadlin in 2007 saying Israel would be, quote unquote, happy if Hamas took over Gaza, because the IDF, the Israeli military, could then deal with Gaza as a hostile state. He dismissed the significance of an Iranian role in the Hamas-controlled Gaza. But this is not meant to be public, right? This is secret cables. This is part of the reason they've tortured Julian Assange for over a decade now. This is the former Israeli defense minister saying they would like to see Hamas take over Gaza. That is their own words in leaked cables that they did not want us to see. Here is some more information. about this, about the rise of Hamas and why. Sorry, why there were many who wanted to see it, many in Israel and many in the neocon U.S. war state. This is from Sam Husseini, a well-known journalist and activist. Just as the U.S. government backing the Mujahideen, which ultimately spawned uh, uh, Osama bin Laden, just as the U.S. government backing the Mujahideen, who would become the Taliban in Afghanistan in the 1980s, Israel helped the rise of what would become Hamas. It was even advocated in the pages of the New York Times. The New York Times, always getting it right. The reason was clearly stated: a desire to divide the Palestinians and undermine the secular PLO. Classic colonial divide and rule. See from September 9th, 1989, an alternative to the PLO fundamentalists. So this is an article in the New York Times from 1989 saying that having Hamas take over Gaza would be good because it would divide Palestinians rather than have them united. And again, allowing this an attack like the one that just happened is what the right wingers in Israel we're hoping for in many ways. It also gets the world, much of the world, thanks to a lot of impressive activism, was turning against the apartheid state of Israel. It doesn't mean turning against Jews, right? As a Jew, I hope that wouldn't happen. It means turning against an Israel, and I'm an atheist Jew, but still, the same idea. Unlike other religions, you can't shake it off. It just sticks to you. But many of the hardest right wingers in Israel wanted this so that they could get the whole world again behind them. And even more so, they can accuse anyone speaking the truth about these issues as being anti-Semitic. So this is serving many of their purposes. Here's another update in terms of the response to this catastrophe, which is Israel's defense minister has ordered a total blockade on Gaza, says there will be no electricity, no food, and no fuel. Now, this is a full-on attack. It is mass suffering against many people who obviously had nothing to do with Hamas's attack. Not everyone in Gaza even supports Hamas. Now, for those who support Hamas, when you are an oppressed and attacked and abused people, and you see your family members killed for decades, then who's to tell you what kind of tactics to use to fight your oppression? But cutting off electricity, food, water, medicine, materials, everything to millions of people it's a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. It's horrific. It's a genocide. And here is the defense minister saying that is what they are currently doing. And then Scott Ritter actually in response said, quick historical fact to the defense minister's post. Quick historical fact, the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto began with the imposition of a total blockade by the Nazis against its Jewish inhabitants. The Warsaw Ghetto was created by Ludwig Fischer, a Nazi who was executed in Poland after the war for his crimes. So there you go, using Nazi tactics, which always I find means you're on the right side of history, right? Let's see here. This is also from Alan McLeod, great journalist with Mint Press, was my colleague at Mint Press for a good long stretch there. And he says, breaking here, photos that capture the moment an Israeli airstrike destroyed Rabat University College in Gaza City. One more war crime in a long series. This is just many, for those listening to the podcast, is many missiles and bombs raining down on a university in Gaza. And of course, many innocent civilians dying. I mean, I can't even imagine the number of innocent civilians that are dying in all these attacks. I wanted to bring you this statement from PSL, which makes a good point. Um, They say Palestinian resistance is not terrorism. It is a basic fact of history that any people subjected to occupation will resist the occupation. What led to yesterday's I don't know, well, that's one of those things. Calling it courageous sounds like you're celebrating it, but you might recall that Bill Maher, who is a disgusting neoliberal nowadays. I mean, maybe it's always been. I don't know. I wasn't watching much of him in the 90s. But right after 9/11, he got his show canceled on CBS or whatever it was because he was saying that what happened on 9/11 was horrific. But he said, people are calling these people that flew these planes cowards. And he's like, you can call them a lot of things. They're not cowards. And that got him, that got his show banned forever from mainstream media. He then got his HBO show where he's put forward his neoliberal garbage. But anyway, it says so. This I thought was a good thread on leading up to more recent lead up to what led to this, because yes, we have the decades of oppression and everything, and murdering and the raids and people put in prison. There are 2 million Palestinians in Israeli prisons. I believe that's the number. I'll check it again in a minute. But in Palestinian prisons recently, many of them are never told what they did wrong or how they could, avoid getting arrested or those type of things. It's just there's no like due process or anything. So PSL says less than a year ago, a new far-right government came into office in Israel. Regardless of which party is in power, the Israeli government has always imposed occupation and apartheid. But the new administration, which includes openly genocidal fascist senior ministers who control the police and prison system, is intent on taking this to unprecedented heights. A wave of killings is underway in the occupied West Bank by Israeli troops, cops, and vigilantes that has claimed over 200 Palestinian lives so far this year. So they mean before this conflict. It's way over 200 now. Already horrific conditions for thousands of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails deteriorated even further. Far-right mobs stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque on numerous occasions under the protection of Israeli police. The construction of Israeli illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian land was hugely expanded. The new government announced its intention to create a national guard, a thinly veiled death squad that would operate under the personal command of the main fascist politician in Israel, Itamar Ben-Gvir, to provide diplomatic cover as this was taking place. The U.S. government has been aggressively lobbying countries in the Middle East to sign, quote, normalization agreements with Israel. Since the state of Israel was established amid a deadly campaign of ethnic cleansing in 1948, most neighboring countries have rightfully refused to officially recognize Israel's existence. But in the last few years, that has begun to change. In exchange for what amounted to massive bribes from the U.S., the governments of UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco established formal relations with Israel, and the U.S. was reportedly on the verge of securing the biggest normalization agreement of all with Saudi Arabia. This existential threat to the Palestinian people's very survival is why the resistance launched this bold counteroffensive. The Israeli government is carrying out a bombardment of unbelievable proportions, targeting Palestinian civilians in an effort to take revenge on this resistance. So that gives you some of the more recent background about what's happening there. But here is an update on the Saudi Arabian normalization, quote unquote, that was moving forward until today. Saudi Arabia ends talks on normalization with Israel amid Hamas-Israel war. The U.S. and other countries have actively encouraged Arab nations to normalize relations with Israel in recent years. And again, that was amidst massive bribes to various countries. The decision to terminate talks was conveyed to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, marking a setback to recent U.S. efforts to broker peace and diplomatic ties between the two nations. Saudi Arabia's decision to halt negotiations raises questions about the future of regional diplomacy and Middle East peace. As a key player in the region, Saudi Arabia's stance on Israel has always been closely monitored. So that's a huge hit to what the U.S. was trying to broker. Okay, I have a bunch more that I will be bringing you, but that will just be at rumble.com/leecamp. It's free to watch there, so just join me at rumble.com/leecamp if you're not watching there. Also, leecamp.net, my locals page, will continue as well. So if you're on those two, nothing changes, but I will see you at rumble.com/leecamp. Join me there, completely free. Here, I'll throw the link in the chat for you. And I have more information on why people are saying that at minimum, the U.S. and, I don't know about the U.S., but Mossad and Israel knew this was coming and allowed it to happen. All right, so there's the link, rumble.com/leecamp. Join me there because it is free to watch, or on my locals page if you feel